Hi, everybody. Hi, my sweet lifers. Listen, it's Lisa Murray here with the Sweet Scoop, the first one. We're relaunching the podcast, and I thought about it and thought, why not go ahead and give you guys an opportunity to have connected with me on a visual as well as with the audio. So, for those of you who are joining us on the podcast, welcome. And for those of you that are actually on the YouTube channel watching, welcome as well. And so today I want to share with you a couple of things. This is my first, I want to use the word sermon really lightly because it really is not a preaching session whatsoever. It's just an opportunity for me to talk to you guys about my life and my thoughts and what's going on in the world, and also to kind of give you some insight into me as an artist and as a person. So with this episode one, what I wanted to do is I wanted to talk about my gifts and how I see those gifts and how I feel like God has given me those gifts. Because honestly, over the years, those of you that have followed me, I've been interviewed so many times, and so many people have asked me the same question. I guess it's probably an interview question that people like to use because it's an easy question to get somebody that's their guest to answer is what's inspired you, or what do you like the best, if you like writing or photography or painting or whatever it is that you're doing. With me, it's kind of a hodgepodge of all of those things, right? Because I've always done a lot of things that were creative, and ask me a lot of times they'll ask me like, well, what's your favorite? And as I am now going into seminary, and many of you that are following me on the channel and follow me for that matter on the email, you know, it's become aware more crystal clear to me God's working in my life. I feel like everything that I've done and everything that happened to me has happened for a reason. And none of the things that I'm experiencing now could have occurred if I hadn't have been through that experience before. And so for that, it's sort of a strange place to be. It's also very comforting, I must say, too, because a lot of the things that have happened to me, especially in my childhood, were very disturbing and tragic. And so for me, it's really nice to be able to look over one's life and say, gosh, I can see some meaning behind that. Or, wow, an aha moment. God was working in that particular way, in a way that at the moment I had no idea that it was even going to come out to anything good. And I'll go into that in a minute. But I wanted to also just say, because there is that component that I want to make sure I get in with you guys, is that in studying the Bible, there's a lot of interest for me anyway in what God is teaching, obviously, but more than that, like how is it applying to me specifically? I mean, it's nice to sit in church on Sunday for sure, and hear somebody, a priest or a preacher, a really great pastor, tell you about the Bible. But for you to hear something that's meaningful, that is a way that someone's life has been touched, that it's almost inexplicable. I mean, it's one of those things where you're like, wow, man, and you don't realize who you're touching when you're sharing your story. And so, for so many people through the years, I've just told my story, and as the story continues to grow and grow and grow, and obviously I change and get, better at one thing and sort of fall off the wayside a little bit with the other, and you seesaw through life. There's seasons and everything. It's been an interesting journey to see how many people have actually reached back out to me since doing the channel and said, man, I knew you when you were shooting my kid back 15, 20 years ago, but I didn't see that. And then other people have come in and given me a great big hug and said, man, Auntie A, they call me Auntie A in the studio, we're just not even surprised. Like, where you're at right now makes perfect sense when you look at the scheme of your entire life. So I want to start out by saying that this is really important for me, I think, before I start on any journey with you guys via podcast or YouTube in terms of this type of content, that you understand who I am. And many of you will not have gone to the channel or even seen me on the different various interviews through the years. So I want to share my story with you so that you're aware of that. And going forward, you'll kind of know the background. I don't want to have to keep saying, oh, whatever, right? So you'll know, if those of you that have been following with me will automatically been caught up to date, so to speak. So I'm going to start at the very beginning because that's really where we need to start, because if I don't start there, some of the stuff that I'm going to say later won't make any sense to you. So I want to start there. And let me say that my very first kind of moment I think that I realized that I was going to be different was when my mother got killed. And she got hit by a train when I was 8 years old. I'm the oldest of five children. And my father was a physician in North Carolina. And it was a very interesting childhood. I mean, it was really bizarre. My grandparents were wonderful, all of them, and very close to me. Nana lived with us, my dad's mother, and my mother's mother and father came to visit all the time. I mean, like, they were with us way more than most grandparents spend with their grandchildren. And it was delightful. And in the summers, I would spend time with them, and I was doted on a lot because my mother had died and I looked just like my mother. And that's a real important thing for me to share with you because it marks a lot about my life. My grandparents had a real hard time grieving over the death of their daughter, and they had kept a lot of her clothes. And the more I got older, the more they felt, I think they weren't thinking about me and they weren't thinking about any of the things that might have done, but they liked for me to wear her clothes and they would call me by her name. And so when I reflected back on that in college, I was in a psychology class. Many of you guys know I have a BS in psychology. And I was like writing a paper. And I remember writing this paper about my childhood. And the professor gave me an A, of course. That's another story. I like to get A's. As you, those of you that know me know that's how I roll. And he was like, man, what a saga. Like, your childhood is just like this crazy storybook that's not normal at all. And for me, what do you know? I mean, like, if that's what you're living, you don't think about that not being normal because you don't know anything else but that to be normal. But it was indeed kind of strange in looking back on it. And I remember going into my closet like at the time that I wrote that paper. So I'm talking about maybe early 20s. I've been married to Brian for about a year and a half, 2 years, and realizing that over half of the clothes in my closet were actually my mother's. And recently, over COVID, we had a lot of Zoom going on, and we reunited with a lot of our high school friends because Brian and I rode the first grade school bus together. Many of you know that, but and so a lot of those guys, because everybody was stuck at home, reached out to us, and we hadn't seen them or talked to them since we got married, and that's been over 30 years. And so we really enjoyed catching up, and a lot of the conversations that we were having were people remembering us as children, remembering parties, slumber parties, Girl Scouts, choir camp, going to church together, all the things growing up in a small town in North Carolina. And over again, my girlfriends that literally I hadn't spoken to, and I'm not kidding, like 30 years, were like remembering me as being so mature and so different and dressing kind of weird. And it was interesting because I had kind of felt isolated because it was not, for me, it wasn't an abnormal thing to be doing that because I was asked to do that and I wanted my grandparents to be happy and pleased with me. And I didn't want to hurt them any more than they were already hurting, right? Um, but the fact that these friends of ours remembered that as part of their marked sort of what stuck out in their minds about me was that I was different, was interesting. Was just an interesting observation. But anyway, enough about that. So I, went through my childhood with all of that craziness going on, and I went off to private Episcopal boarding school the last year of high school and stayed there for the first 2 years of college and got my associate's degree from St. Mary's in Raleigh and then Mary B. And while I was there, I became an alkalite. I had been raised in the Baptist church from day one. Mother was in the choir, daddy was in the choir, granny and big daddy were church going people, Nana was a church going person. Literally, if you didn't get up and go to church on Sunday morning, you were in bed or at home all day. You couldn't do anything else fun. If that was your reason for not going to church, you didn't feel good or you didn't want to go or whatever it was, the excuse lasted the entirety of the Sunday. And you were not allowed to go do anything whatsoever with your friends or anything else for that matter. And so nobody wanted to miss church because everybody wanted to be able to get done and go home and do something fun. And you know how kids are, sometimes you feel like you're dragging them. I know when mine were little, I was always a little bit daunted by the fact of making them sit still so quietly in church. Are they getting anything out of it? They are. Just take it from me. They do. So take them. Do take them. It's nerve wracking for the parents, but it's not happening for naught because they actually do, like little sponges, soak all that stuff up, and you want them to, especially the way this world is right now. You want to get them as much as you can, as close to the Father as you can. But anyway, but I came out of St. Mary's Episcopalian. That's the point of that. I came out absolutely loving the liturgy, loving the formality, loving the whole thing, the robes, the candles, the whole thing, every bit of it I loved, and became a part of the vestry while I was at St. Mary's and was a senior warden there, and really enjoyed my participation there as a senior person there at the school. And then we moved to Texas in 1991, and we kind of bounced around and did some churches here and there. And we found St. Catherine's, and that's where we raised our children, and that's where we are today. That's the same priest, Father Andrew, who is currently our priest at St. Catherine's, where I do the show with him on Sweet Life in Christ a couple of times a month on the channel as well. So anyway, I went off to the University of Houston and I got my degree in psychology. And while I was there, I was absolutely starstruck by one of the professors that was there. He was a real famous guy and he had tenure and he had been published, and he and I really got along, and he wanted me to be a lawyer like really bad. He saw my personality as being a perfect personality to be in the court and potentially as a judge, and he fueled the fire, so to speak, in wanting me to do that. And so that was my sort of vision for myself, and it really aligned well with my father, who was, you know, a physician, and he wanted all of his children to be college educated, and he had promoted that with all five of us. And my grandmother, my mother's mother, was also college educated, which is very rare. I realize now, I didn't realize at the time when I was in college first go round, that it was a big deal that my grandmother had a college degree. But it was, you know, I came from a family that getting a degree and becoming something specific in the society and making a difference was part of what you were expected to do as an adult. And so my dad was like super stoked about the law school thing. He thought that was just going to be amazing. And so Brian and I had been married for 7 years, you know, and so I said, you know what, I need to stop and make a baby. Brian's mother was absolutely wanting one so bad, and Brian's the baby of four, and so she was ready for more grandbabies. And so we did. We made Victoria Ann. Well, it's interesting because I knew in my mind, in the back of my mind, that when we had her, we needed to take her to see my Uncle Jim and Tyler. He was a photographer in Tyler and had been for a long time. And I knew in my gut that he needed to take her pictures because he had always given me pictures of mom. And all that I had was mom's pictures. Of course, I had her clothes, but I mean, like, really, the photos that you have of people when they're gone are so important. And that's really an important point to make because it really guided my career. It guided my choices about being a photographer. It led me to help people with cancer. Over the last 24 years, it's been a driver to make sure that people had that. Like, if they didn't have a gazillion dollars or a whole lot of diamonds or a big, you know, life insurance policy, who cares? What you don't have at the end of the day is a photography, a photo of your family or a photo of your mom, and that's what you really want. And so I had that heartbreak of not having very many photos of mom, and he had given me those through the years. And so I took Sissy to see him, and while we were in his studio, I was behind him, and I said, "Get the shot." I like screamed at him and yelled at him, and not in a mean way, but just kind of like I told him when to get the shot. And I remember he looked back over his shoulder at me, and he was like, "Alisa, you're a photographer." And I was like, "I am not. I'm going to be a lawyer, blah, 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 blah." And he laughed and he was like, "Actually, you're a photographer. You really are." And I had already known that I was an artist from a long time. I sort of skipped over the fact that I was the senior artist at St. Mary's, and I had gotten a scholarship at Savannah College of Art and Design in interior design and painting. So art was always and has always been a major part of my life. I've always painted, I've always drawn, I've always done those things. But I had let it go when I went to U of H because, you know, I'd been out for a year, and I knew that being an artist, as a regular artist, you know, sitting in a room and painting on an easel was not really what my daddy wanted me to do. And he was also an artist. He painted. My mother painted. Both my grandparents painted. So I came from that as well, but they never saw that as a career. And so when I got on that path to be a lawyer, Daddy was just jumping on it like crazy because he thought that was just, okay, thank God she's not going to try to be an artist. That was what I had set to do originally. And, but anyway, so I turned back around and looked at him and I'm like, "I am not. I'm going to be a lawyer." And he laughed. He goes, "Okay." And so about 6 months later, Victoria Ann, of course, was bigger, and it was time to take her pictures again because, as y'all know, babies change and grow like you blink your eyes. And so we set it up in Sugarland where we were living, and we're still here in Sugarland. And he came to visit me, and he brought an easel and backdrops and all the things, and we had film in the camera, and because it was film back then, it was 1998, 99, excuse me. And we took pictures of Sissy, together. We were there together for an afternoon. He had come down from Tyler, and we spent a good afternoon together visiting about his parents who had already died. And of course, Granny and Big Daddy were like parents to me because Mother had died, and they were there so much. They were so much a part of my life. And anyway, so then he went back to Tyler, and he had a heart attack, and he passed away. And I left the film in the camera, and it had been in the camera for maybe 2 or 3 months. It's like, remember back when you had film and a camera, you weren't like we are today with our iPhones taking pictures of everything we do, right? You would use the film, and then after the film roll was up, then that's whenever it was time for you to take it to be developed. And sometimes you were surprised because it had been in the camera for so long, you had forgotten what you first took on that film roll. But anyway, I took it over to get developed, and when it came back, I was a part of a little group that mommies would meet because I didn't have one. And so there was a lot of new moms that had moved to Sugar Land that weren't near their moms. And so the hospital put together a really neat program with nurses and different professionals. And we would go each week, and all of our children were in the same um, space in terms of developmentally. We were all delivered about the same time. So give or take a few months here and there. Most of the people that were in that program's babies were either right at 6 months or a little bit older or a little bit younger, but not within more than a couple of months of each other. And I was sitting in the circle, with the moms and the babies, and one of the moms saw the photos that I had taken with my uncle, and she said, "Oh my goodness, I know somebody who knows somebody who's got a magazine in Houston, and I want you to let me have this photo of your daughter because I think it's a magazine cover." And I thought that was the strangest thing she'd ever said, because I was like, that's just crazy. I mean, I've not taken any classes ever in photography, and my Uncle Jim and I did this, and he's not well. He didn't die immediately. He had a heart attack, and then it took a while for him to, pass. And so I was like, man, yeah, okay, you can take it, because I had film. I could make another copy, right? So I gave it to her, and sure enough, it made the cover of a magazine. Well, that's kind of startling, right? That really is a very sort of a making an A in something that you just don't really know, right? Naturally, that you're given the gift to be able to do, and not realizing that that is an actual gift, like in James 1:17, perfect and from above. And so I didn't recognize it as such, right? I just had no idea that that's even what was going on. And so next thing you know, I get all these calls. Like, all these mamas want me to take their pictures. The babies are coming into the house. We've got a studio set up in the house. Uh, some of the people in Houston, the Astros, which, I'm a big Astros fan, get wind of it. Some of those mamas with their babies. And I start flying from New York and California, and I'm here in Houston, and I mean, the career just takes off. It's like really crazy how it just goes crazy. Like, within 5 years' time, I'm everywhere, and people know me and are calling me, and we're just completely booked and busy. So much so that by the time it was time to give birth to James Edward, my son, my father had passed, and my father-in-law was like, "You guys have got to have more space. You can't be in that house in Sugarland anymore. You need to have land. You need to be able to photograph more families, places to put them out, and be able to put them in trees." And so that's when we moved to the house that we're in now, that you guys are very familiar with the kitchen show and the garden and all of that. And but anyway, it was kind of crazy. It was like, it just was a God thing. It really was a God thing. And so all these people that have come in, I treated them like family, right? I didn't treat them like they were coming to see me in a studio. I was like, genuinely, and still am genuinely, who I am, right? So it's like a hug and a kiss when I meet you at the door. The door is always open. It's always been at my home. If we needed to take a break, if we needed to bathe the baby in the sink or in the tub, whatever we needed to do, you're family. You're here. You're in my home. You're welcome to be here, right? And so if that meant I was cooking supper and you were happened to be still in the studio, you're going to come on in, and we're going to pull up a seat at the table and break bread together and have dinner together. And so as a result of that relationship that I have with my people, my families, they've been with me forever. Like, I've got babies who I've held in my arms when they were days old, and are now bigger than me and graduating from college. I mean, like, that's the type of relationship I have with these people, and they're my family. And I didn't see that. I saw it, but I didn't see the what I mean by that is this. I saw it as something I was supposed to do, and it's who I am, right? But in my reflection back at this point in my life, I see God setting that up. And that's one of the things that the grandmother said to me over the holidays, this past holiday. She came to see me, and she just was so happy. She's like, baby, everything that you've ever done, every person you've ever met, God has put in your life for a reason. And everything that's happened to you has happened for a reason. And I shook my head, yes, ma'am, I know. And she said, and what's most important for you to understand now as you go in and you're doing what we're doing today, the Sweet Scoop, is that you have a following. I mean, people know you, they love you, they trust you, they've been with you, they know your heart, they know that you're with the Lord, they know that you believe that, and they want to hear from you. They want to hear from you. And so your decision to go to seminary is so life cycle. It's like we didn't know the journey, but now we know the journey. And where we look back, we see all of these people and all these families that you've touched with their children. You know, they're still right here wanting to visit with you and have tea and a cookie and go play in the garden, and they want to hear you talk about Jesus. And it's what God had planned the whole time. And that's what I want you guys to think about in terms of like your life, because when things get really crappy, and believe me, I'm not one to tell you mine's been a bed of roses, because it's not. I mean, I will say, safe to say, once me and B got married, everything's been pretty sweet. But suffice it to say, my childhood was not. And unfortunately, I think that for a lot of people, there's a season here and a season there. And God knows, you've got to be on the lookout for all kinds of things trying to intervene in your life. But I've stayed so close in my faith. I've always known that my mother was with Jesus. I've always known it since she was killed. And anytime that I ever worried about anything, I always knew to pray. And and we've had times, when we were raising the children, things were a little bit crazy. We've had times where we didn't know how this was going to end, or that was going to end, or what was going to be the result of this or that. But I tell everybody, and I want you to believe me when I say this, anything that's happened to you today that may not be good is going to be over with in 72 hours. It may still be lingering, but what feels like in the moment, it's like, oh, I'm in the middle of this horrible situation. If you'll just take a deep breath and give it to God and pray, it passes and you get on the other side of it. And I think that for a lot of people, they dwell in that. They get caught up in that, and they don't see the out of it, but they also don't reflect back through their lives to see all the ups and the downs. And we all have ups and downs. I mean, that's just part of being alive and being human. And it has to be that way. I mean, if it was all a bed of roses, you might get a little bored. I mean, maybe you wouldn't. I don't know. I'm happy with having a few little things chaotic here and there. Big things like cancer and death and divorce and suicide and really drawn out illnesses are things that I don't like and I don't want, and I pray not to ever have. But we're all going to die. And so I learned that lesson real early. You just don't know when you see somebody how long you have with them. And so it's one of the reasons why every time I see you, I hug you and I kiss you. And every time I leave you, I hug you and I kiss you, because I didn't get to hug and kiss my mama goodbye. Nor did I get to hug and kiss my daddy goodbye. Because, folks, whenever he died on his birthday. And I had been taking pictures in the morning and called North Carolina in the afternoon. And it was his birthday. It was his 64th birthday. And I picked up the phone and called and got my sister. And I said to her, well, I want to talk to Daddy and wish him a happy birthday. And she said, he's gone. And I said, what do you mean he's gone? She goes, he's gone. He's gone to live with baby Jesus. He's with Mama now. He's dead. He's died. He died this morning in the garage. He just dropped dead about an hour ago. And I was just like, what is it with my parents? Like, they just, one minute they're here, boom, the next minute they're gone. But I learned that lesson, and it's a big lesson. People here that are around me, not my family immediately, but a lot of my families that are with me, so many of them don't live in that reality of that. And it's hard to explain that to them because I've lived it my whole life, right? So you've got somebody who's 45 years old, who's had their mother their entire life, and they're all kinds of upset when they might potentially be 80 something years old and in pain all the time, and their bodies have worn out, and it's time to go live with baby Jesus. And they're all upset because they're going to lose their mama. And that's one of my faults, I will say, is that it's hard for me sometimes because I try really hard to take a deep breath and not get I don't know what the word is, because it's not ugly, because I'm not ugly and I don't say a word about it, but it amazes me how many people don't prepare for death. They need to prepare for death just as much as they prepare for births of brand new babies. I mean, it's a celebration of an ending and a new beginning, and a really a beautiful new beginning if you're a Christian, because you are no longer going to be in any pain, and you're going to be reunited with everybody that you love, and it's an amazing experience to even think about the kingdom. How cool is that? So it's not a sad thing. It's just something that people don't, I guess, they just don't want to think about. And I don't make them think about it. I don't talk about it with them at all. I'm talking to you today because I want you to know my point of view. But, and where my point of view is from, because that's the thing. I think because I've lived it, I can speak about it. If I had not lived it for 42 years without my mother, I'm not in a position to talk to you about that. And that is a respectful situation I have for both the people who haven't experienced it, as well as reciprocation for those of us that have, because it's a very different thing going through life without one's mother. Um, very different. I mean, it's a completely different experience from anything else. Anyway, back to the other. I wanted to share with you. So that had happened. We were here. The studio's going crazy. We're building the business. The business is booming. And I decided I want to give back to the community because that's what I was taught. That's how I was raised. It's important to do that. And so I created the Art and Medicine Project, where I did photos of mothers with their children who had survived breast cancer. And a lot of people through the years got confused that my mom had died of cancer. And I was like, no, mom did not die of cancer. But the connecting point of that is these are photos, lasting portraits of someone dear to you, your mother, with your children, that eventually we're all going to lose our mother, right? And so it's important that I gave that back to the community. And I did that for 10 years. And in doing that, and then I also did one with kids with cancer, in doing those things in the community, it brought a lot of attention, obviously, as you can well imagine, to me as an artist. And as I began to do interviews and was on television and whatnot, in fact, the one of the calendars was on the Today Show with Kathy Lee and Hodo back when Kathy Lee was there on the anchor desk, and it was a really big honor to have it be featured and mentioned. But through the years, I had been featured, and I think that's part of the reason why God prepared me to be able to do this, because it's not scary for me to mic up. I'm just as comfortable in front of the camera as I am behind the camera. And so for me, it's not ever been an issue of I'm scared to be on YouTube or I'm scared to be on a podcast or whatever. I mean, it's just me. It's just little old me. And if you don't like it, turn me off, right? It's no big deal. But anyway, so that got the attention of a lot of people, and it got the attention of my neighbors. And it ended up that the deed restrictions at the time were like, you can't do a business out of your home. And of course, we've been doing the business out of our home, and everybody knew that we were doing the business out of our home. But on point and principle, they had to do something about it. And so we were in this mediation of trying to navigate how we were going to continue to stay here and do our artistry and not be blatantly opening the door for somebody to put, I don't know, a daycare or something in the neighborhood that nobody wanted. And so we were navigating that very gingerly. And this magazine had printed me in this magazine. They had an article and they put me in the magazine, and they had printed in the magazine that I worked out of the house, which is part of what instigated this sort of interest in the fact that we were doing the studio in our home. And they wanted to feature the house because I've decorated it. I mean, I'm an artist, so I've decorated it. And so when you meet artists, rarely will you find an artist that's living in a white home or a gray home or a home that doesn't have a whole lot of funky little groovy things in it, because we as artists are attracted to funky groovy little things. We like little spaces that are cozy for reading, and we like little nooks and crannies with neat and unusual little things that we picked up along the way on a vacation or whatever. And so I told him, I said, no, but I will do this for you. I'll write an article about it and I'll send it to you and I'll shoot it. So it's a turnkey piece. And I'd never written an article. I mean, granted, I'd written multiple papers in school and made A's, but I had never written an article before. But they called me, and of course, I was their photographer as well. And they were like, hey, we want you to write your own column. You get to do whatever you want, name it whatever you want, and do whatever you want with it. We want you to be the back of our magazine. And so I named it Living the Sweet Life. And that's important because for the last, it was 2006, for the last however many odd years that is, I think 15, maybe 16 years, I've written every single month my column Living the Sweet Life. And I use that as the basis for the branding for what people already knew me as, for spreading good news and talking about God and talking about mom and talking about grandparents and talking about marriage and talking about children and babies and being sweet to each other and all the things that I've talked about through the years in the writing of the column became part of what I wanted to share in visual on the channel. And that all happened during COVID when everybody was shut down. It was like I was asking God, I'm like, people aren't coming to see me with their babies for obvious reasons. And, we need to figure out what's my next thing going to be. I mean, like I can't, I'm not a person that likes to sit still. And so I put the channel together so that I could share with you the cooking, the gardening, the things that I do, who I am, just who I am. And then it dawned on me that, I was able to basically, by doing so, create a legacy for my family with the recipes from my grandmothers, with my personality to be able to share that with others, not only you today and now, but 30, 40, 50 years from now, which is something that I don't have of my mother. And so it's a legacy of leaving behind something, and I encourage everybody to do it, even if it's a private channel and no one can get to it but your family. Sit down in front of your iPhone or in front of your phone, however, whatever phone it is you've got, and talk about the family, talk about the family tree, talk about a recipe. Give that gift to your family because it's what will be there after you're gone. And it's such a really wonderful time that we're living in with technology to be able to do that. I cannot express it to you how much I would have loved to have had a video of my mother. I mean, like, it would have been amazing. So many people have stopped me over the years and said, you look just like her, you talk just like her, you act just like her. Well, I don't know that. I don't have anything about that. I know what I see in a picture, but I don't have that captured on film. Lenny Kravitz was interviewed one time about his mama, and it's the other reason why I decided to start the channel, because he was in an interview and he said, he can turn on his mama on TV and he hears her voice and he sees her talking, and it's like she's not gone. And what a neat gift that is. And so I really do have that in the back of my mind as one of my motivators for doing the channel. And I wanted you guys to know that, because there's a driving, motivating force behind leaving back a legacy for somebody else to see about what goodness you did, who you helped, who you saved. You never know when you're talking to somebody, some kid that's a teenager that maybe is suicidal or getting into drugs or being bullied. You never know when you give them your attention. You just sit and listen and really listen, and then give them some advice that's not preachy, but just some really good, solid advice about life. And then they come back 5 years later and they're in a whole different place, and they know one of the reasons why they're there is because they sat down and you took the time to talk to them. And you didn't even know when you were doing it that that's what was going on. God was using you. And so, and he does that. He uses me all the time. Like, he just uses me all the time. And he tests me too. We're going to talk a lot about that this year on the podcast, because it's amazing to me how he does that as well. And uses people to show me different things and to confirm for me different things and all of that. But this channel and this journey has really all happened because of me paying attention to the gifts that God has given me. And James 1:17 is every perfect gift is given from above and not in shape-shifting shadows or something like that. And you'll never hear me sitting down and giving you a major preaching session on the Bible. I'm in the middle of it right now. I'm in the middle of seminary, and I'm loving every single minute of it. And while I've been doing it, first semester, I ran across some old papers of my mother's where she was corresponding with some people in seminary, and she was like barely 20. And just over the last probably 72 hours, realized that my Aunt Carolyn, same Aunt Carolyn that was married to Uncle Jim and Tyler, has come across some of my grandfather, my mother's father, Big Daddy's preaching sermons in his handwriting, and it's a perfect timing, and it's not done and not thought of absolutely as a coincidence. It is absolutely God's hand working, because it's at the perfect moment in time that I need that to be confirmed that this is the right path for me, that what I'm doing, where I'm taking my life, where I'm taking my channel, where I'm taking people that are with me and around me is in the perfect place that it's supposed to be at that moment. And I wasn't ready for that until now. And so now God's revealing that to me. And that's the thing also I want you to remember, is that I did not have a clue when I was shooting babies 24 years ago that he was building a foundation. I didn't have a clue when we were going through the mediation about the studio being in the house that I would get a column, let alone write one for 16 plus years, that would then turn into a channel. And all the content and all the recipes and all the things that I've been sharing in print all these years, many of you know that have gotten it. Many of you that are with me know that I launched my own magazine, The Sweet Lifer, back in November, and to give people a channel directory and a way to find things that they may have missed, because a lot of people are busy and they're not going to be able to tune in to YouTube every week and see a recipe or a garden update, or see me and Father Andrew over on the couch talking about whatever we're doing, whether it's a disciple or a woman in the Bible or sacraments or whatever we're talking about. And so it's important to know that there's this continuum of your life, and every single thing that has happened to you has happened for a reason. Every single person that you've met, whether they're with you or not with you anymore, has come into your life for a reason. They were either there to teach you or they were there to get taught by you. And so when I used to think about people that I didn't know why they left, like, they were here and I wanted them to be with me forever because I want everybody to be with me forever. And then they were gone. I was like, well, did I say something? Did I do something? I would really lament that and think it was my personality was too big. Maybe I scared them away, because I have a tendency to be very open with everybody. I mean, you guys know that. You have experienced that from me, not only on the channel, but in anything that you see me do. I am who I am. Like it or leave it. Love me or don't. A lot of people either are completely immediately in love or completely and immediately turned off. And I understand that, because it's that drastic with me. I'm not one of these people that it takes a long time to get to know at all. I am real with you from the moment I see you, and will always be that way, because I've always been that way. I don't have any other way to be. And I think that's why God's using me with the seminary. I think God knows that there's a lot of people who are close to me that will listen to me. And I have a lot of people around me sometimes that's hurting. There's a few that are having cancer right now as part of their journey. And I've been in very thoughtful prayer and talking with the Holy Spirit about giving them and uplifting them, giving them some peace with that. Good days and bad days, and it's just no way to live. I want the days to be all good. And so I'm hoping that he'll hear that prayer, and he'll do that for them, and that will not be a situation that they'll have to be in that space or that season for very long. But in any case, what I wanted you to get out of this first sweet scoop was that life is really sweet. It really is sweet. And that there is so many wonderful experiences that we all have that we don't think about when we're having them, that they are a part of a journey that has been planned for us. Because I can clearly see that with Uncle Jim giving me photos, with Uncle Jim telling me I was a photographer, that led to the photography, then that led to the column, then that led to the channel, that led to me giving back to the community. That got the attention, but that was also part of God landed the column. The column gave me the confidence, the building of a base of readership alongside of building a base of people who are being photographed. And then the experiences of being on television giving me the experiences of not being scared to be in front of a camera. Every bit of it is full circle. It is all a God thing. It is all in His plan for my life. So I don't know what the future holds. I don't know at all what the future holds. None of us do. But what's interesting to me is that it is, to use no other way to explain it, is sweet. It's sweet. It's living a sweet life because I've got my space based in the Holy Spirit. I've got my grounding in the Holy Spirit. I've got my belief in the Holy Spirit and in Jesus and in God. And I know that no matter what I do, I'm never alone. And He's got His hand on top of me. He's always had His hand on top of me. He knew when Mother got killed that that would make me different. He knew when Mother got killed that that would be a part of my story too. And that honestly, I don't think I would, I know I would not be who I am had she lived, because there's no way I could be who I am had she lived. I'm not saying I would have been drastically different, but I will tell you, she was Woman of the Year when she was killed. She was a very well remembered person in the community, even 42 years after having passed. She was, on TV as well. She was in radio, not radio, but she was in newspapers. She made a cookbook I didn't even know. She did so much in 31 years. She packed 31 years of life. Her life was like jam packed. 3 kids were brought to earth, a beautiful marriage, touched people's lives, apparently was connected to seminary stuff. I mean, like, there's a lot of stuff for somebody to accomplish in 31 years. Granted, it's taken me 52 to do all that I've done, and hopefully I'll have 52 more. Nana lived to be 102. So let's keep praying that that's going to happen, because I've got lots to do and I don't have any desire to be gone just yet. I really want to be able to touch as many people's lives as I can. Any way that that looks like, whether it be in the garden, whether that be in the kitchen, whether that be on this couch, whether it be in that studio, whether it be with Father Andrew on the other couch in there, or a social media post, however God needs to use me, I want to be His vessel. And I hope that you've enjoyed this today, because I wanted you to know, like I said before we get started, on different subjects, my take on my gifts and where I am and how I have become who I've become, and who I am and why I want to be who I want to be. And it's grounded solidly in the Holy Spirit and in Jesus. And so I want to share that with you today, so that you know that about me, and also you know that that is every bit a part of living the sweet life. So for those of you that are watching on the channel, I want to thank you for watching. Please do me a favor, if you enjoyed it, like it and share it. And please let people know, because the channel has grown leaps and bounds. It's another confirmation from God. 70,000 views, guys. 70,000 views. That's 30,000 more since August. That's a lot. And I'm just plugging along, doing what I'm told to do. I wake up and I hear a little voice. I follow that voice. I make a prayer. I follow it. I follow it, because He's leading this thing. It's not me leading it. He's leading it. And I am excited to see what the future holds. So I hope you guys have a wonderful afternoon or an evening whenever you're watching me. And I will see you soon on the channel. Take care.